Vidhammer Fantasy.
Welcome back to Vidhammer. I'm Spudlow, and in this video I'm going over my second round matchup for the Darkside Comics 2,999 point tournament in December of 2013. The scenario this round is a battle line variant called the Blood-Soaked Choppa, where each side gets to nominate a core unit that carries the Choppa, giving them +1 strength and +1 attack. I win the roll for board edge and take the left side since it's closer to the house, thinking it might be a safe place for my Grey Seer. I go over my army list in the first round, but for spells, my Warlock Engineer takes Warp Lightning, my Plague Priest gets Blessed with Filth and Vermintide, and my Grey Seer ends up with Crack's Call, Plague, Wither, and the dreaded 13th. My opponent, Bruce, has Tehenhuan on a Stegodon that gets Pan's Impenetrable Pelt, Amble's Spear, and Wyson's Wild Form, as well as 2 level 2 casters, one with a Dispel Scroll that gets Chain Lightning and Harmonic Convergence, and another with the Cube of Darkness that ends up with Curse of Enrahir and Savage Beasts of Horrors. For his other characters, he has a Saurus Oldblood with a rerollable 1+ armor save, and a BSB with things that I don't recall. Otherwise, he's got 3 units of Saurus, a hefty block of Temple Guard, 7 Cold One Riders, and 3 Pterodactyls. We both start out deployment by placing our core Choppa units across from each other, foreshadowing the epic clash. Then I put my Rat Ogres right in the center and the Plague Monks towards the bottom as he puts down 2 more blocks of Saurus Warriors. I park a unit of Clan Rats behind the house and he puts his Cold Bloods up at the top, so I follow with my Slave block right across from them. Next is his big block of Temple Guard, and I put down my other unit of Clan Rats. His Stegodon comes down that has Tehenhuan riding it, and I put my Doom Wheel at the bottom. He puts his Pterodons down at the bottom as well, which is fine for me since the Doom Wheel is half of my shooting in this list. His whole army's down at this point, so I throw my Hell Pit in the gap that I left in the center, and I put both of my giant rat units up at the top, hoping to give those Cold One Riders enough to keep them busy the whole game. My Gutter Runners go down early next to the house, then we do his characters, with his casters standing behind his Saurus and Temple Guard units, the Old Blood going with the Choppasaurus, and his BSB in with the Temple Guard. For mine, the Warlock Engineer and Grey Seer go with the Clan Rats behind the house, and the Plague Priest on the Furnace with the Plague Monks, of course. The BSB goes with the Storm Vermin so they can drink the Skaven brew, and I put my Warlord on a Bonebreaker in with the Rat Ogres, even though I don't really need a Lookout Sir for this round. Other start of game elements gives me 2 Warpstone tokens for my Grey Seer, and the Storm Vermin get Hatred from the Skaven brew effect. He gets the +1 and wins the first turn roll, moving his battle line up in pace. With the exception of the Rat Ogres facing off with the Temple Guard, the direct matchups don't look too bad for me. For now. Our first magic phase ends up 4 versus 2. He uses his first 2 for Amber Spear against the Gutter Runners, but the spell fails, and he discards the remaining 2, which moves it over to me. In Compulsory, the Doom Wheel gets just far enough that I don't need to move the Plague Monks back, and the Abomination shoots way out in front. I think that guy's in heat or something. I move both of the Rat Darts up on the Cold Ones, and bring up the rest of the line, reforming the Storm Vermin to 5 wide, hoping to take away that Steadfast from his Saurus when we make contact. Magic is 5 versus 4 this time. I go ahead and have my Grey Seer eat a single Warpstone token and use 6 dice to go for the dreaded 13th. I make the casting cost, but it's not irresistible, and he dispels it with a scroll. For shooting, the Gutter Runners put a single wound on the Choppasaurus, then the Doom Wheel tags the Pterodactyls for 2 wounds and causes them to flee from the resulting panic check. But they rally on the second turn, and for charges, the Cold Ones charge the upper Rat Dart, and the Choppasaurus charge the Abomination. And the neighboring Saurus try to charge the building, but they roll a 3 and end up a little short. His other units close in a bit and make some angle motions. The only thing that potentially worries me is the Temple Guard. but the black rock terrain in the center is impassable, so I don't need to worry about a countering flank charge on the storm vermin. Big rolls for his magic phase, and we end up with 12 versus 6. His first 4 go for Wyson's wild form on the blood-soaked Saurus, and I dispel it with a scroll. Not just to save the Hell Pit, but the overrun onto the storm vermin as well. His next 4 go for Amber's Spear against the Rat Ogres, and he goes for the higher level, but the spell fails. Next he tries Curse of Enrahir on the Hell Pit, but I use 3 dice to dispel this, and his last 2 go for an attempt at Harmonic Convergence on the Blood Saurus, but it fails, and I breathe some serious relief that he didn't get off any spells on a 12 versus 6 magic phase. With no shooting, we move into combat where, up at the top, the Cold Ones trample the first Rat Dart and overrun into the second. In the center, the Old Blood puts a wound on the Hell Pit, and the rest of the Saurus manage another, before the Hell Pit flails his fists, even though he should have gone at initiative 4. But he takes out 6 and stomps on another to end up winning the combat, but the steadfast Saurus passed the cold-blooded break test without much of a problem. On the bottom of the second turn, I have the Storm Vermin charge the Blood Saurus, and the Rat Ogres charge the Temple Guard. I was so excited here that the Rat Ogres actually made it into combat, but that enthusiasm isn't long-lived. The Doom Wheel makes another run at the Pterodactyls, but ends up closer to the lower Saurus. I move the monks up just short of the firing distance. The Gutter Runners hop out of the house, and the slaves serve themselves up for the Cold Ones. Magic is 7 versus 3, so I use 4 to go for Wither on the Blood-Soaked Saurus since I was just within range, but he uses the cube to dispel that one. I use my last 3 for Bless with Filth on the Storm Vermin and end up with Irresistible Force. One roll too late there. Bruce tries really hard to jinx my Plague Priest into the void, but it doesn't happen. He has to settle for each of my casters taking a wound instead. For shooting, the Doom Wheel picks off the single Saurus, while the Gutter Runners don't even waste time shooting. But finally, the Engineer caps off the Doom Rocket towards the combat, and ends up putting a wound on my BSB and Hell Pit, and takes out 2 Storm Vermin before clearing out 7 of the Saurus. In the upper combat, the Cold Ones beat up on the giant rats, but they manage to escape as the Cold Ones overrun into the slaves. As the blood-soaked Chappas clash, my BSB scores a wound. The Storm Vermin only manage 1 more since they only had 3 rows touching. The Hell Pit is nice enough to take out 6 Storm Vermin and wound 3 Saurus, who all make their saves. But luckily he was just getting started and takes out 8 Saurus from the other half of his attacks. In return attacks, they kill off the BSB and 4 Storm Vermin, and the Hell Pit saves a single wound on it. Then he thunderstomps for 1 more, and I win the combat by 4. They both pursue, and the Hell Pit gets a 13-inch pursuit for the cutdown and overruns into the Stegodon. In the final combat, I have my Warlord issue a challenge, which his unit champion accepts. Champion saves 2 wounds from my Warlord, but the Bonebreaker finishes off the deal. Not all of the Rat Ogres are in contact, but with 10 attacks they get 3 hits and 2 wounds that both get saved, and I was so happy to get them into combat before. They take 5 wounds in return, and I end up losing the combat by 9 after his banners and ranks. The Rat Ogres were so awesome that they run 12 inches, probably to escape my wrath. At least I know who's not on the roster next time. He restrains and reforms to face the Storm Vermin. Then it's over to turn 3. Strangely enough, he has those Temple Guard charge the Storm Vermin's flank at the start of the 3rd turn, as the Pterodactyls fly away. Magic is 10 versus 6, with the first 3 going toward Wyson's wild form on the Temple Guard, which, thanks to a low casting roll, I'm able to dispel with 2 dice. The next 3 are used for Amber's Spear on the slaves, which I let him have. I only wish I had more slaves to offer up for that sacrifice. He uses his last 4 for Harmonic Convergence on the Stegodon, which I go ahead and dispel with my 4. We jump back into combat, starting at the top, where the slaves lose the combat by a good amount, but the only important thing is that my general is fleeing. The slaves now need a 5 to pass their stubborn break test and fail. They explode and take out a rat ogre and a cold one as well. In the central combat, the storm vermin actually manage 7 wounds thanks to the chopper, but they lose 7 as well. Unfortunately, I'm disrupted, so I don't get to count my ranks. I lose the combat and run through several different units, losing 3 along the way. Thankfully, the Temple Guard didn't get enough to overrun into the Hell Pit combat, where the Abomination starts off putting 2 wounds in impact hits on the Stegodon. Then he shrugs off a wound from Tehenwan, but then decides to try to feed on the Stegodon. Or maybe he was trying to do something else to it. But it definitely didn't go well, because he didn't cause any wounds and the Stegodon got really pissed off. It only managed a restraining order though, and passing its stubborn break test, it hangs around to consummate their hatred. On my turn, the Plague Monks are my only chargers, and they barely make it to the Saurus. The Doom Wheel tries to get out of the way as the Storm Vermin and the Rat Ogres continue to flee, but the Rat Dart manages to rally. If only I could move him up so I could save the Rat Ogres. But knowing that the Cold Ones are likely to charge them on this turn, I move up my Gutter Runners to give him a different target and position my Clan Rats close enough to the Rat Ogres so that the Rat Ogres are going to bounce through them when they flee. I'm banking that the Clan Rats won't actually break, and hopefully the Rat Ogres will rally next turn so I don't lose the points. Despite all my best efforts not to suck, I roll Snake Eyes for my magic roll. But I do get a channel, and now it's time to pull out that wonderful Power Scroll. I have the Grey Seer eat his final Warpstone token and use the Power Scroll in an attempt at the dreaded 13th. With the casting cost down to 13, I pull it off, and he's only got a single Dispel die. It's not enough to kill off the Temple Guard, but it does take out 17, leaving the unit with only 4 models and the BSB left. Enough for him to reconsider charging them into the Hell Pit on his turn. My shooting was a bit silly as I aimed for the Cold Ones and not at the Temple Guard. I managed a single wound, then my Doom Wheel lights up the Storm Vermin for 2 wounds. That's what you get for fleeing. In the Monster Love battle, the A-Bomb takes 3 wounds and gives out 2 as the honeymoon ends, and the Hell Pit hauls ass out of there like he'd knocked her up or something. In the lower combat, the Furnace gets 6 impact hits. Then the fumes are too much for a couple of Plague Monks, but the Saurus seem to be fine with it. For normal attacks, the Plague Priest scores 2, and the Monks don't get anything past the saves. Then the Saurus swing at the Plague Furnace, but only manage a single wound. Finally, the Wrecker takes out 2 more right as my memory card fills up. Suckin' ass. I don't have video for the rest of the match, but I'll recap how it ends up. The cold-blooded Saurus pass their break test, and we head into the final turn. The Central Saurus charge into the flank of the Plague Monks, the Cold Ones charge the Rat Ogres, and the Stegodon goes after the Hell Pit, probably looking for alimony. I have both of them flee, since they end up passing through the Clan Rats to a safe distance, and the Clan Rats manage to pass their panic test. His magic is 4 versus 4 thanks to some channels, and I'm able to tie him on his attempt at harmonic convergence. In combat, some Saurus and Monks die along with a single wound on the Plague Furnace. I lose the combat, but with the Plague Furnace still intact, the Monks are unbreakable. Over to my turn, I try to get the Doom Wheel into combat, but no such luck. However, it does end up close enough to shoot into the Saurus, but with strength 2 again, it fails to wound. The Rat Ogres and Hell Pit both manage to rally, but the Storm Vermin call it a day and head back to camp. My final magic phase ends up 9 versus 5. I use 3 for Wither on the flanking Saurus, since they're in range, but he dispels it. And my final 6 go for a Hail Mary dreaded 13th on the Temple Guard, which goes off right after he moved one of his casters into it for cover. It wipes out the unit, taking the caster and the BSB along with it. There's lots of stabbing and things in the combat phase, but none of the units die, and the Monks are still unbreakable, so we call the game for time. I ended up with a minor victory this round, thanks to that final dreaded 13th. We both pick up bonus victory points for killing the opposing Bloodsoaked unit, and he gets 1 more for taking down more banners than I did. I don't think the Hell Pit and Stegodon ever got back together, but I've given him a new nickname, Sweet Lovin'. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, or just telling people about it would be great. Till next time from Vidhammer, keep fighting.